Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I want to thank you for joining me here on this Friday morning on Now TV. Let me remind you again to be sure to look up William Bell, who is on every Saturday evening, and you will find William's teaching to be absolutely amazing. So be sure to join him. Be sure to join me here every Friday morning as I share with you my insights into the Word of God in regard to biblical prophecy. You know, I hope that you are doing well here in the midst of the coronavirus. In my part of the world, here in South Central Oklahoma, things have started to open up just a little bit. Now, one of the disturbing things about that reality is that although people are starting to get out, they're starting to stir. Matter of fact, I drove by one of the major building supply stores yesterday, and I simply could not believe it. The parking lot was packed north to south, east to west. I don't know that I've ever even seen that parking lot that full, even prior to Corona. And I thought to myself, okay, what's the deal here? And as I drove around town doing my, quote, necessary shopping, I was absolutely stunned at the amount of traffic on the roads. Now, what's disturbing to me about that is, although here in Carter County of Oklahoma, we've had extremely few infestations, nonetheless, just over the last week, we've had our very first fatality. And we've had another infection. Now, numerically, we've had very, very few. We've only had 3 infections and 1 death. That amounts to 30%, which is kind of scary. But nonetheless, comparatively speaking, when you look at the infection rate of the rest of the U.S. and the world, I mean, we've been extremely fortunate. And so it's somewhat disturbing to me that a lot of people are right now, they're acting like, well, no danger to us. And so they're going out, they're intermingling. You go to the stores and they are not engaging in social distancing. I see people out everywhere, literally everywhere. They're standing next to one another. They have no masks on. Now, look, I got to tell you, I'm not paranoid. I don't wear my mask all the time. I only do it when I think I'm going to be in where there are an awful lot of people mingling and present. But the reality is, this is an extremely contagious disease. And when you're somebody like me who is in the highest category of risk, as I've shared with you, I'm 70 years old and I've had double pneumonia 13 times. So honestly, I cannot take the risk, the chance of being in close proximity to an awful lot of people. I mean, I've got my alcohol rub in my truck. I've got it in my pocket everywhere I go, and I have my mask. I simply do not understand how people can be so flippant, uncareful about something that is obviously very, very very, very serious. So, with all of that said, I hope that you are safe. I hope that you are being constant in prayer. I hope that you are continuing to trust in the Lord. Look, some sources are saying this is going to get worse again before it ever gets better. That there has to be a communal type of immunity built up before this thing goes away. I don't know. I'm not a medical authority. I read this and then I read that, and I look at them and I see contradictory messages coming from different medical authorities, and we can only do the best that we can do. What I urge, all right, get as much information as you can. Do not be naive, but be cautious and be careful. And be constant in prayer, trusting in the Lord. All right. Well, We are continuing our study of this challenge of Christ, and we have been looking at, we've started to look into 2 Peter chapter 3. Now, I truly hope that you will go back and that you will watch and that you will listen very carefully to what I shared with you last week. And that is that Peter says, "Beloved, I now write unto you in the second epistle, in both of which to stir up your holy minds by way of remembrance of that which was spoken before by the holy prophets." And I pointed out to you that Jesus said in Matthew 5:17 and 18, "Do not think that I came to destroy the law and the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill." Now that's an elliptical statement, as I've shared with you, meaning I did not come to destroy the law and the prophets, but to fulfill the law and the prophets. "And verily I say unto you," and please keep in mind, that little Greek term, amen lego humin, is always used when a writer or a speaker is about to say something to emphasize something he has already said. So that means that verse 18 is emphasizing verse 17. Jesus said, "For verily I say unto you, until heaven and earth passes away, not one jot, not one tittle shall pass from the law until it's all fulfilled." Now, very quickly, let's do our application. Until heaven and earth passes away, not one jot, not one tittle shall pass from the law or the prophets until it is all fulfilled. Well, Peter, 2 Peter chapter 3, is talking about the passing of heaven and earth. Therefore, all right? Therefore, if Peter's talking about the literal, physical, material heaven and earth that we see around us, then that means that until every jot and every tittle of the old law, the law and the prophets, will remain valid and binding in full force until the passing away of the material, physical cosmos. Oh, but wait. Houston, we have a problem. And that problem is all three futurist views of eschatology believe, and by the way, just this morning on Facebook, I was engaging in dialogue, debate, discussion, if you please, with some individuals that were arguing God removed the law at the cross. If the law was annulled at the cross, then, quote, heaven and earth passed away at the cross. I'm sorry, folks. You can't get away from that. Until heaven and earth passes away, not one jot, not one tittle shall pass from the law or the prophets until it is all fulfilled. And yet, all three futurist views, to reiterate here, all three futurist views insist that the law was removed at the cross. If the law was removed at the cross, then heaven and earth passed away at the cross. And remember, he didn't just say, until heaven and earth passes away. He said, not one jot or one tittle shall pass from the law or the prophets until it is all fulfilled. Well, if the law passed away at the cross, then that means that all prophecy, all old covenant prophecy, was fulfilled by the time of the cross. Well, I'm sorry, that won't work. Because watch this. The old covenant, the old law, by everyone's admission, foretold the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. Well, that was after the cross, right? Okay, well, if you have the law passing away at the cross, then how could you have the old covenant law and prophets not being fulfilled, in other words, remaining valid, until AD 70? Ask yourself this question. If a law or a covenant has been abrogated, or are the provisions of that law or that covenant still valid and binding and effective after that covenant has been annulled, abrogated, taken off the books? I got to tell you, I was in a formal written debate with a guy some years ago. This guy's a lawyer, for crying out loud. Well, I should say he's trained in law. And I asked him that question. If a law or a covenant has been stricken off the books, it has been annulled, it has been abrogated, are the provisions of that law, of that covenant, of that testament applicable after it has been annulled? Unbelievably. You know, this shows the desperation of people when they are in a state of what is known as cognitive dissonance. What is cognitive dissonance? Great big fancy word, right? That's what they call a 50-cent term. Well, anyway, cognitive dissonance is continuing to believe something after you know it has been proven wrong. All right? Continuing to believe something even though you know it has been proven wrong. So when I ask this law-trained individual, if a law or a covenant has been abrogated, or any of its conditions, stipulations, mandates, etc., are they applicable and binding and effective after that law has been stricken from the books? And this professionally trained, quote, lawyer, unquote, said yes. Like I said, a prime example of cognitive dissonance. So when I challenged this individual, and by the way, all of this exchange is found in a book that I published of that debate. It is entitled The Passing of the Law of Moses at the Cross or in AD 70, ? Pardon me. That book is available from my website. Oh boy, sneeze. Pardon me. I'm not going to stop the camera, okay? It's kind of like I've told you, look, when I'm filming, this is what you get. I don't have a fancy studio. I don't have fancy editing equipment. So if I have a sneeze, you're going to get the sneeze. And I do apologize for that, but that's my allergies, right? So anyway, you go to my website, DonKPreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. You go to the store and you look up the book, The Passing of the Law of Moses at the Cross, or AD 70, or it's sometimes known as the Preston-Simmons Debate. You order the book. Now, if you order this book and you send me a note saying, Don, I saw your mention of this book on Now TV, I want to take advantage of this offer, I will refund your shipping. Now, if you are overseas or if you are out of the continental U.S., I can provide a PDF copy at 50% off the retail of the paperback book. Okay? That'll save you a good bit of money. Just send me an email through the website saying, I saw your offer on Now TV on the book, The Passing of the Law of Moses, at the Cross, or in AD 70. I'd like to take advantage of your PDF offer at 50% off. Okay, I have to hurry now because time is getting away from me already. I hope you see the problem. Not one, until heaven and earth passes away, not one jot, not one tittle shall pass from the law or the prophets until it is all fulfilled. Now, once again, if Jesus is talking about literal, physical, material, heaven and earth, and if Peter is talking about literal, material, physical, heaven and earth, then that means that until literal, physical, material, heaven and earth passes away, not one jot, not one tittle shall pass from the old law or the prophets. Now, let me remind you one more time, folks. All three futurist views, all three of them, insist, they teach, it is a fundamental part of their doctrine that the law passed away in the first century. Well, I'm sorry. You cannot affirm that the law of Moses passed away at the cross without saying that, quote, heaven and earth, unquote, passed away. And you cannot say that the law was removed at the cross without demanding that the entirety of the law and the prophets, every jot, every tittle, was fulfilled by the time of the cross. But here is Peter in 2 Peter chapter 3, still looking for what? The fulfillment of the old covenant prophecies and promises of the passing of heaven and earth, just like Jesus predicted in Matthew 5. Oh, and just like Isaiah predicted in Isaiah 51, Isaiah 65, Isaiah 66. So one more time, you see, you absolutely have to catch the power of this. And I fully understand how difficult it is to open our spiritual eyes to see things that we did not know were there. Let me illustrate. When I wrote my very first book, entitled 2 Peter chapter 3, The Late Great Kingdom, which has morphed into this book, The Elements Shall Melt with Fervent Heat. In that book, and it's included in this one as well, The Elements Shall Melt with Fervent Heat, it's available on my website. When I wrote that book, I cited Matthew 5, 17 and 18. I gave it verbatim, all right? And I took note of the fact that I was raised as a fifth-generation member of the amillennialist. Amillennial view, that is. And that, as an amillennialist, I believed the law had passed at the cross. I believed that. I taught that. I debated that. I've shared with you my conversations with a Seventh-day Adventist elder in Pea Ridge, Arkansas. Wonderful man. I had never, ever seen, in all of my years, in spite of the fact I had had these countless discussions with this Seventh-day Adventist elder and other Sabbatarians, I had never actually seen what Jesus said in Matthew 5, 17 and 18. I always glossed right over part of it. It wasn't there, as far as I was concerned. And one day, I'm reading Matthew 5, 17 and 18. And I look, and for the very first time ever, Jesus' statement, until heaven and earth passes away, not one jot, not one tittle shall pass from the law. Hey, have you ever read the Bible? And you're sitting there reading familiar verses. Verses that you've read 1,000 times perhaps. And all of a sudden, you see something you've never ever seen before. And you might literally say, wait a minute, that wasn't there yesterday. That wasn't there before. Well, it was. But you see, our mind has a way of seeing what we believe in our heads. Not what is actually there, but what we believe is there. And look, I've written 31, maybe 32 books. And this happens to me virtually every day. I'm typing, and I'll type a paragraph. Now, my practice is after I've typed a paragraph, I go back and I proofread it. I still don't catch all the typos. But I type a paragraph or I type a full sentence, and I go back and proofread it. I proofread it for content, and I proofread it for typos and for grammatical errors. And so very, very often, when I'm proofreading it, I think, man, that's good. Okay, next paragraph. Then, when I have well-trained proofreaders to proofread my manuscript, they circle all these grammatical errors, all of these typographical errors. They point out all of these, not content errors, but structure errors. And I'm going, no, I read that. I checked that. Well, what happens, and this happens to every author, I'll guarantee you it does. As I am typing, my mind knows what I want to say. My fingers don't always get the message. But in my mind, I am seeing what my fingers typed, but my mind is imposing onto the page what my mind wants to see, not what my fingers had typed. Well, you see, that's what happens to us when we are reading the Scriptures. We may have read a passage 1,000 times, but we have added to our database of knowledge. We may understand history better. We may understand linguistics better. We may understand context better. We may understand audience relevance better. But the point of it is, we now have additional database content, so we're reading along in a passage, and all of a sudden, something that we've never ever seen before jumps out at us and slaps up beside the page, up beside the heads and says, hey, look at me, look at me. So, that's what happened to me with Matthew 5:17 and 18. Until heaven and earth passes away, not one jot or one tittle shall pass from the law. I saw it for the first time, and I wrote about it in my book, the very first book, and I included it in here. Now let me share the little anecdote to illustrate what I'm talking about. Boy, my time's getting away from me today. Okay. When that book was published, my very first book, I sent a copy to my brother. And he called me up one night after he had had the book, and he's not a great reader. He doesn't really like to read, but he read the book, and he says, Don, I got to tell you something. I was reading your book, and he said, you were talking about Matthew 5:17 and 18, and you were pointing out that it said, until heaven and earth passes away, not one jot or one tittle shall pass from the law. And I'm going, oh no. Don made a huge mistake here. That passage does not say that. Now, in the book, I said, if you were raised as an amillennialist or perhaps postmillennialist, you may not ever have seen this, so please, lay this book down, go get your Bible, and read the text for yourself. So my brother says, I did. I went and grabbed the Bible. And he said, I read Matthew 5:17 and 18, verse 18 particularly, and it didn't say what you claimed it did. It did not say until heaven and earth passes away, not one jot or one tittle shall pass the law. And I'm going, oh my goodness gracious, how could Don have made such an incredible mistake? He said, so I read it again, still didn't say it. I read it again, still didn't say it. I'm just getting more embarrassed for you as each time I read it. I read it the fourth time, it wasn't there. And the fifth time, I go, one word at a time. Okay, I'm going to analyze this one word at a time. And I'm going, until. And I thought to myself, I don't think I've ever even seen that word before. until heaven and earth. And he goes, I'm saying, uh-oh, passes away. And he goes, oh my goodness, I've never seen that. Not one jot, not one tittle shall pass the law until it's all fulfilled. And he said, Don, I saw it. It took me 5 times reading it to see it, but I finally saw it. And he said, I called my wife, and she came in there, and I said, okay, babe, I want you to read Matthew 5, 17 and 18, and tell me if it says, until heaven and earth passes away, not one jot or one tittle shall pass from the law. She was a well-read lady, and she just said, well, I don't need to read it. It doesn't say that. She said, I've read that text 1,000,000 times. And he goes, well, I have too. But read it for me. She read it, and she goes, oh, I told you it doesn't say that. And he goes, well, no. Read it again and tell me if it says, until heaven and earth passes away, not one jot or one tittle shall pass from the law. And she read it again, second time. And she goes, Gary, it doesn't say it. I just read it. It doesn't say it. Why are you having me do this? And he goes, okay. What I want you to do is I want you to read one word at a time and look up at me and tell me what the word is. So she takes the Bible, and it's until heaven and earth. And she looked up at me, my brother said, and says, uh-oh. And she read it and said, Gary, how have we never seen this in our lives? Listen, ladies and gentlemen, Jesus most assuredly did say, until heaven and earth passes away, not one jot, not one tittle shall pass from the law until it's all fulfilled. Thus, until 2 Peter 3 was or will be fulfilled, the entirety of the old law remains in effect. We have more next week. See you there.